Remarkable timing today in Washington as this Supreme Court ruling drops at the very same time that you're moving this bill for gun safety that you endorsed here in the Senate. Does this ruling have any impact on the makeup of the bill in your view, or could it the final vote?
You know, I've just briefly looked at the Supreme Court decision, but I don't think it has any bearing at all on the legislation. The Supreme Court focused on the fact that the New York law did not have the proper protections because it required cause in order to get a license to have concealed carry. We don't get into those issues at all. Our bill is focused really on three things. One is the mental health issue, which I think everybody agrees now is something that needs to be addressed. And by the way, I believe it needed to be addressed whether we were doing this in the context of a gun safety bill or not. Yeah. It's a substantial part of the bill. It's the majority of the funding. It's about the fact that there are people, including this young man who committed these horrific acts in Texas, who are mentally ill, need treatment, and somehow they're able to get weapons and they shouldn't be able to. So it's providing more access to mental health and also making sure those mental health records are in the national background system. And then second is school safety, which I think, again, parents all over the country agree with. We need to harden our schools and protect our kids. And then third, there are some very specific things that relate to the kinds of problems we've seen in relationship to these mass shootings. One would be ensuring that people's records who are between 18 and 21 years old are actually provided to the background system. And of course they should be. These are records of criminal activity, records of mental health history. Right now, many of these records are not being provided. They're sealed or even expunged. They need to be provided specifically to this system. So those are the main parts of the bill. There is no new red flag at the national level.
Understood.
That's been misinterpreted by some.
Are you surprised that some of your Republican colleagues, though, are either no votes or skeptical because of the language in the red flag component? I know you spent a lot of time on due process. What would you tell them about their concerns before they vote?
Well, in some respects, working with some of the groups that support the right of people, to be able to bear arms, there is more protection now because you do have this due process in place. For states like Ohio, we do not have a red flag law. This does not create a red flag law. There's no federal red flag law. It would give Ohio the ability to access more funding for things like drug courts or other interventions, things like veterans courts. But if they did that, provided that if they got the funding for that, then they would have to ensure that there were due process rights in place even for those programs. So it's not a new red flag law at the federal level. That's something that people have incorrectly said about the legislation. But it does help in terms of this mental health issue, and I think that's probably the biggest impact this is going to have on our country.
Looks like you're one of 14 Republicans supporting the bill at this point. Could that number be higher? And when is this done? Tomorrow?
I think it'll be done tonight or tomorrow, and the number will be higher than 14. We don't know how much higher. But there's one person who is absent who expressed his support for the legislation and has worked with Senator Cornyn and Senator Tillis on it all along the way. And then there are a couple other members who are considering supporting. So we'll see. But look, it's important to do something, and I think that is part of what this process has been about, is to show the American people that these horrific acts of violence that we saw in places like Texas or Buffalo, that we have some response. And again, the changes in mental health access through these community health centers, I think may in the end be the most significant part of the legislation.
Do you think that this bill, assuming it becomes a law, could have prevented Uvalde or Buffalo?
Possibly, yeah.
Through the background checks?
Through the background checks and through identifying this individual through his mental health history. This was a suicide. And by the way, the vast majority, more than 95% of them are these mass shootings. So they are both a horrific mass shooting of, in this case, kids and teachers, but also they are suicides. This young man absolutely intended to be killed in this process. And that was part of why he did this, according to what we know. But that would be typical of all these other mass shootings. So people sometimes ask me back home, well, what's the mental health component here? Well, it's clear to me. These are people who are, in effect, committing suicide. and taking other people with them.
Senator Portman, I want to ask you about reports that Intel is reportedly telling some lawmakers that it's going to delay the groundbreaking for this massive computer chip plant that it's planning to put in Ohio. I'm wondering if you got a heads up on this, and if you're concerned. They're pointing to the delay in passing the CHIP Act as part of the bipartisan innovation law that just seems to be grinding forever.
I did get a heads up, and of course I'm disappointed because I'm really excited about this commitment to Ohio. It would be the largest economic development project in our state's history. And as important, it's about the future, because semiconductor production is about the future economy, and it's critical to our national security to have the ability to reshore some of that infrastructure for making chips back to America. We designed these semiconductors originally. We used to have, 40 years ago, 37% of the production here in America. Now we're down to 12%. And if this legislation is not passed, I believe we'll be down to single digits before long.
I didn't realize this project, this campus, though, hinged on the CHIP Act. I thought that was a commitment that Intel made. Are you concerned they pull out altogether?
No, I think from what I've heard that they plan to move forward. The question is timing. And they have other countries around the world that are offering them, huge incentives to build fabs in their countries. And that's because other countries in Europe and in Asia in particular understand that this is part of the future. It's sort of like, the countries that had the oil in the ground benefited a lot over the last several decades. Countries that have semiconductor production will benefit a lot going forward. You see in places like Ohio, trucks or cars, parked at large parking lots, and a raceway in northern Kentucky as an example I saw recently as I flew into our airport in Cincinnati, and they're just waiting for semiconductors. I mean, so this is an example. If you've got a car on order, probably you're waiting, and probably it's because the semiconductors, the supply chain is being constrained. It's an enormous problem for us right now.
So what's the timeline on this legislation? Are senators serious about getting this done?
I think so. Yeah, I've had lots of conversations even today about it, and my hope is that we will make all the big decisions even before we go out on break here today or tomorrow, and then over the next 2 weeks, finalize some of those decisions so we can put the bill to a vote when we get back. It certainly is important to move forward because of the competitive issue with our Asian competitors and our European competitors. It's also very important in my home state of Ohio. It's going to create not just thousands of great paying jobs eventually, but immediately thousands of construction jobs. Other companies will come in as suppliers, which will create more and more opportunity. And these are good, high paying jobs. So it's important we get this done.
Lastly, I want to ask you about the retirement savings legislation that you put forth. I know it's cleared the Finance Committee. It's a component bill in the House, allowing people to save more through 401ks and IRAs. It's an important story for our viewers and listeners on Bloomberg. Are you concerned about the impact of inflation creating a retirement crisis in this country? A lot of people have been watching their bond funds drop all year.
Yeah, I certainly am. I'm concerned about what's happening to people's retirement savings with the market, both the bond market and the equity market. But I'm also concerned about people choosing not to set as much aside for retirement because they need that funding just to be able to survive with gas prices at $5 a gallon, with food and clothing prices skyrocketing. So I'm concerned, and I think that's one reason this legislation is so important. It's quite timely for us to provide additional incentives for people to save for retirement. One example that's in the bill, as you may know, is that currently you have to take your retirement out and pay taxes on it at a certain age, 72, and we raise that age to 75. Now that is very significant to a lot of your viewers who are thinking,
sure is.
I'm working into my 70s,
That's
why should I
right.
be taking my money out and have to pay taxes on it? But there's also a lot for small businesses, which is where the biggest problem right now is of not having a plan. Part-time workers will get coverage under this plan, which is very important. We also are helping with regard to low-income workers to get them banked, get them into plans. So there's a lot of good stuff in this legislation. It was passed out of the committee yesterday. It's something we've worked on for 5 years. Senator Cardin is my partner in this, has been in 3 previous bills. And the committee vote yesterday was unanimous. That rarely happens around here. So my hope is we can get this significant retirement package to the Senate floor soon. You mentioned the House has comparable legislation.
Yes.
Actually, over 30 of our provisions are in the House bill. So we've worked together with the House over time to make those 2 bills as as overlaps as possible so that we can
And
get
leadership wants this on the
done.
floor?
Yeah. And the president's indicated that he supports it as well.
Senator Rob Portman, it's great to see you on a very busy day. Thanks
Joe.
for being
Good
with
to
us
see you, man.
on Bloomberg.